The Kthavar War Council had never lost, not once, not in 4,000 years of galactic conquest. They had burned the home world of the Vorith in 11 days. They had shattered the Plexi Collective's orbital ring with a single coordinated salvo. They had crushed 22 spacefaring civilizations, each more advanced than the last. And they had done it methodically, brutally, without mercy or pause. So when their long-range sensors first detected the third planet of a mediocre yellow star on the outer edge of the Orion Arm, the Kthavar Supreme Warlord Caxdul didn't even rise from his command throne. He simply ordered a standard planetary assessment. The report came back in 6 galactic standard hours. Single species, carbon-based, bipedal, oxygen-breathing, mid-tier technology, no unified planetary government, divided into over 190 competing political factions, constantly warring among themselves. The creatures called themselves, according to intercepted transmissions, humans. Caxdul had laughed, actually laughed, something he hadn't done since the Vorith begged for mercy on their burning continent. "These animals are killing each other over lines drawn on dirt," his tactical officer Valen reported. His crest feathers raised in amusement. "They have nuclear weapons, but haven't used them on each other in over 70 of their years, apparently out of mutual fear. They have reached their moon barely. Their deep space capability is almost non-existent." "How long to pacify the planet?" Caxdul asked, finally looking up. From his tactical display, Balloon didn't hesitate. "With a standard invasion fleet, 4 days. If we want to preserve the surface for resource extraction, perhaps 9. The Supreme Warlord nodded slowly. "Send the assessment to the Harvest Division. Flag it as a Tier 4 acquisition. No need for the full war fleet." He paused, tilting his reptilian head. "In fact, send the 4th Expansion Group. Let Commander Drextal use it as a training exercise." The bridge crew relaxed visibly. A training exercise. 4,000 ships against a fractured, barely spacefaring planet. It was almost insulting to call it a mission. No one on that bridge said a word about what happened to the last 14 species the Kethar had assessed as Tier 4. They simply ceased to exist. 3 weeks later, Commander Drexal stood at the command bridge of the invasion cruiser, Undying Wrath, and looked at the blue-white marble of Earth growing larger on his forward screens. He felt nothing but bored professionalism. He had done this before. He would do it again. His 4,000 ships fell into assault formation. His planetary bombardment platforms rotated into position. His troop transports began spinning up their drop engines. He activated his broadband transmitter, standard Kavar protocol for civilizations that had achieved basic radio communication, a courtesy granted so the dying species could understand what was happening to them. Inhabitants of the third planet, he broadcast in 63 detected languages simultaneously. "You are hereby designated as property of the Kavar Dominion. Resistance is," recorded as his sensors officer screamed. Not called out, not reported. Screamed. "Commander, contact bearing 07. Multiple contacts. Commander, I am reading." The display lit up, not in front of them, behind them, on all sides of them. Drexal spun to his tactical screen and felt something he hadn't felt since he was a hatchling. Fear, where empty space had been. Certified triple-scanned sensor confirmed empty space. Ships were decloaking. Hundreds of them, then thousands, then more. Ships unlike any. Design in the Keith of our database. Massive, dark, angular, built not for elegance, but for one single savage purpose. Destruction. And every single one of them was already locked on. The last thing Commander Drexel managed to say before the first volley hit was a single disbelieving word. How the undying wrath died in 4 seconds. The remaining 3,999 Keth of our ships lasted 11 minutes. Not one escaped. Not one distress signal got through. Not one survivor was left to answer the question burning through every remaining key of our mind across the galaxy. Where did humanity get those ships? And more terrifyingly, where did they go after the battle ended? Because when the Kavar finally sent a scout probe to examine the battle site 3 weeks later, the humans were gone. Their fleet had vanished, and the blue planet below was quiet, peaceful, and completely, impossibly undefended again. As if nothing had ever happened 47 years earlier, the meeting had no official name. It appeared in no government record. The 17 people in the room held no titles that anyone outside this bunker would ever verify, and the bunker itself was buried beneath 300 FT of granite in a mountain range that didn't appear on any public geological survey. Admiral Elena Vasquez set her coffee on the table, looked at the 16 other representatives of humanity's most powerful military and intelligence organizations, and spoke 4 words that changed everything. "They are already here." Silence. She clicked a button. Holographic images materialized above the table, grainy, partially corrupted, footage captured by deep space sensor arrays that officially didn't exist. Ships, not human ships. Angular, massive, dark, orbiting just beyond the helipause of the solar system, watching, measuring, recording. "These images are 14 months old," Vasquez said quietly. "We've been tracking this species internally. We're calling them the architects for 11 years. They've been doing this to every system they pass through, cataloging, assessing, rating," and then she clicked again. A star map appeared with small red markers, scattered across dozens of systems. 22 species, all of them gone, all of them assessed by these same ships before they disappeared. She paused. "We are next on the list." The room erupted. Questions, protests, demands for clarification. Vasquez waited them out. "How long?" a man asked when the noise died down. General Marcus Webb, the quiet one who always asked the right question. Based on their historical patterns, Vasquez said, 5 to 10 years before their main invasion force arrives. "We can't beat them," someone said immediately. "Look at those ships. Look at the size of them. We have nothing that can touch them conventionally." Vasquez nodded. "Which is why we aren't going to fight them conventionally." She clicked again. On the screen appeared something that looked at first glance like an asteroid belt, but the asteroids were moving with too much precision. "Project Exodus Dark," she said. "Not a weapons program, not a defense initiative, a construction program. 40 years, 17 nations contributing in absolute secrecy. And when it is complete..." General Webb leaned forward, studying the images. "Those aren't asteroids." "No," Vasquez said. "They're ships camouflaged as asteroids, 6,000 of them." She let that number hang in the air. "Built in the asteroid belt, wrapped in regolith and ice to defeat any sensor scan, programmed with fully autonomous AI weapon systems, and powered by reactor technology that produces 0 detectable emissions." She finally smiled, and it wasn't a warm smile. "We have been preparing for exactly this moment for 47 years. Webb stared at her. "Does anyone else know other nations? The 17 nations in this room, their heads of state, approximately 943 scientists, engineers, and military officers, all operating under the most stringent security protocols ever devised." She picked up her coffee. "No leaks, not one in 47 years. How is that possible? Because every single person read in on this program knows what happens if it fails. Every one of them has children, grandchildren. They understand what the alternative looks like." Her voice was steady but not cold. It carried the weight of 4 decades of quiet, terrified determination. "People keep secrets when the secret is big enough." The room was quiet for a long moment. 6,000 ships, Webb said. "Against what we saw in that footage, on how many do they typically bring? For a Tier 4 assessment, our intelligence suggests between 3 and 5,000. She paused. "We believe we will face approximately 4,000. 6 against 4. Those aren't terrible odds. The odds aren't the concern." Vasquez said, "The concern is what comes after we win." Everyone looked at her. "If we destroy their invasion fleet and the home planet of Earth is right here, visible, obvious, unprotected, They will come back with everything they have. 100,000 ships, 1,000,000. They don't lose gracefully. She tapped the table. So, the fleet can't be associated with Earth. No human weapon signatures, no identifiable debris, no survivors who can report where the attack came from. You want to make it look like someone else did it? I want to make it look like no one did it, she corrected. I want the Keith of Our, or whatever they call themselves, to lose their invasion fleet, arrive at Earth, find a primitive planet they've already written off, and have absolutely no idea what hit them or where the threat came from. She looked around the table. We fight. We win. We disappear. Earth stays quiet. And they spend the next century hunting a ghost. Webb was quiet for a very long time. You've been planning this for 47 years, he said finally, since I was 23 years old. Yes, Vasquez said, since the day my mentor showed me those first long-range images and told me we had maybe 50 years to be ready. Are we ready? She looked at the holographic display. 6,000 ships, silent and still in the asteroid belt, wrapped in rock and ice, waiting. We're ready, she said. Back in the present, 11 minutes after the Kavar invasion fleet ceased to exist. The Exodus Dark Command ship, the INS Reckoning, moved silently through a debris field that had once been 4,000 warships. Fleet Admiral James Kowalski, grandson of one of the original 17, stood at the bridge viewport and watched the wreckage drift. Fleet status, he said quietly. 41 ships lost, approximately 900 crew, his executive officer, Commander Sarah Chen, replied. Her voice was controlled barely. 731 wounded. No Kavar survivors detected. Kowalski nodded. 41 ships, 900 souls. He would carry every name for the rest of his life. Commence Phase 2, he said. The Reckoning's drives ignited. Around it, 5,959 ships began accelerating, not toward Earth, but away from it. On pre-plotted courses toward the deep outer system, the holographic cloak systems engaged. One by one, the ships vanished from every spectrum of detection. Within 20 minutes, the battle site was empty space. Within 40 minutes, the fleet had dispersed to 17 pre-desated deep space waypoints. Within 6 hours, every piece of detectable wreckage had been collected, cataloged, and stored. $6,000. Ships gone like they had never existed. Kowalski stood at his viewport for a long time after the last ship disappeared from visual range, thinking about his grandmother, Elena Vasquez, dead now for 16 years, and everything she had built in the dark in secret out of terror and love in roughly equal measure. Message for Earth Command, he said finally. Chen looked up. Ready, Admiral. 3 words, Kowalski said. Tell them it worked. Supreme Warlord Caxdul had not slept in 11 days. This was not unusual for a Kavar in crisis. Their biology allowed for sustained wakefulness far beyond human capability. What was unusual was the expression on his face, something his subordinates had never seen before, something that none of them had a name for because no Kethar had ever displayed it in living memory: uncertainty. The War Council chamber aboard the Dominion throne, the most heavily armed vessel in the known galaxy, was silent, except for the quiet hum of quantum processors running continuous threat assessment algorithms. The enormous holographic battle display at the center of the chamber showed the last known position of the 4th expansion group, and then nothing: static, debris, empty space. Tell me again, Caxdul said, his voice dangerously quiet. Tell me exactly what the probe found. Run, who had somehow retained his position despite delivering the worst intelligence failure in Kathavar history, kept his crest feathers carefully flat. The probe arrived at the engagement coordinates 21 days after the fleet went silent. It found approximately 40% of expected debris mass from the 4th group's ships, the remaining 60% missing. No energy signatures, no weapon residue matching any known species, no survivor pods, no distress beacons, and the planet. Exactly as previously assessed, Tier 4 mid-range technology, no unified government, no detectable fleet assets, no shipyards capable of constructing anything above system defense scale. Run paused. The inhabitants appear to be completely unaware that a battle occurred in their outer system. Caxadul stared at the display. 4,000 ships, he said. My ships, 4,000. Gone in 11 minutes. Yes, Supreme Warlord, by a species that cannot build warships. A longer pause. By a species that appears to not have built warships, Supreme Warlord, there is a difference. The Warlord rose from his throne. He walked to the holographic display and studied it with the focused intensity that had made him the most successful military commander in Dominion history. 4,000 ships. 11 minutes. 0 survivors. 0. Emission signature. 0 identification. Who could do this? He asked. Not rhetorically. He genuinely wanted an answer. His intelligence chief, Moxville, stepped forward carefully. We have considered every known spacefaring civilization within 800 light years. No species in that range possesses fleet assets capable of this engagement profile. The energy release patterns in the debris suggest weapons operating on principles we have not yet discovered. The attack vectors show simultaneous fire from all angles, an encirclement that would require prepositioning of forces that somehow evaded all of our long-range sensor networks. How? Cool demanded. We don't know. Moxville held the warlord's gaze with difficulty. The most viable hypothesis is that whatever attacked our fleet had access to cloaking technology that renders ships completely undetectable to our sensors. Not just partially masked, but entirely invisible, as if the ships were not there at all until the moment they fired. Perfect cloaking, Veloon said, slowly. That doesn't exist. It didn't exist, Moxel corrected carefully. Another silence. Could it be the humans? Someone asked. A junior tactical analyst young enough to ask the question that senior officers were carefully avoiding. The room turned to look at him. He held his ground. The debris pattern. The attack coordinated from deep in the system's outer asteroid belt. The timing right as we began our approach vector. They knew exactly where we were going and what we were doing, and they're right there on that planet. He gestured at the display. What if they knew we were coming? What if they prepared for it? Kadul looked at the analyst for a long moment. The species, he said, that cannot build ships above system defense scale that we know of, Supreme Warlord. The Warlord walked back to his throne, sat, folded his hands in the Kthavar gesture of deep thought. Send a second fleet, he said finally. 3 times the size, full war fleet, not an expansion group. I want that planet assessed in person. I want every object, larger than a grain of dust in that entire system, cataloged and identified. I want whatever attack the 4th group found and destroyed. He paused. And I want that junior analyst promoted. He may be the only officer in this council with the cognitive flexibility to understand what we're dealing with. The K of our 2nd fleet, 12,000 warships, arrived at the edge of the Sol system 49 days later. They came in carefully this time, slowly sweeping every frequency, every spectrum, every quantum wavelength they had. Their cloaking detection suites were running at maximum sensitivity. New software patches written in the week since the disaster designed to catch anything with a detectable energy signature, no matter how small. They found nothing. For 3 weeks they searched. They cataloged every asteroid in the belt, every comet, every moon, every object of any kind larger than 30 matters in any dimension. Nothing. They swept the outer system, the Aurort cloud, the helipause, nothing. They descended into the inner system and passed close enough to Earth to read the electromagnetic noise of the human radio spectrum. Sports broadcasts, political arguments, music, entertainment programming. The same fractured, chaotic, wonderfully unaware civilization as before. No fleet, no weapons, no shipyards, nothing. The fleet commander, a cautious, experienced warrior named Brixthal, sat in his command chair and reviewed the results for the 10th time. Nothing. He thought about the 4,000 ships of the fourth group, about the 11 minutes, about the lack of survivors. He thought about the analyst's question. He looked at Earth on his forward screen. The blue marble, the white clouds, the completely undefended, apparently helpless, apparently primitive world. Something is wrong, he thought. Something is deeply, fundamentally wrong. He just couldn't identify what. He filed his report, inconclusive. No evidence of advanced spacefaring civilization in the system. No hostile fleet detected. Recommend continued monitoring. He did not recommend invasion. For the first time in 4,000, in years of Kavar history, a fleet commander looked at a Tier 4 world and said, "Not yet." The Kavar spent 6 years hunting ghosts, 6 years of deep space sensor sweeps, probe deployments and intelligence missions across 100 systems, 6 years of analyzing battle debris, reverse engineering energy signatures, and quietly interviewing the surviving vassal species of their dominion. Species who had already been conquered but still lived, who might have heard rumors, might have seen something, might know something. 6 years of nothing. The Ghost Fleet had no home, no base, no pattern, no identity. It had appeared once at the moment of maximum need, and then dissolved back into the void of space, as if it had never existed. Kakdul had not lost a night of sleep since his initial crisis. Kthavar did not dwell in fear. They adapted, reassessed, and planned. He had diverted enormous resources to solving the mystery, but even he had begun to believe quietly, privately, that perhaps the attack had come from some other advanced species that simply chose Earth's solar system as a convenient battleground. Perhaps he thought the creatures of the blue planet had simply been lucky. In the 6th year after the destruction of the fourth group, the Kavar launched their next expansion push, not toward Earth, but deeper into the Cygnus arm. New targets, new acquisitions, life moving forward, as it always had. They were 6 months into the Cygnus campaign when the signal arrived. Not a distress signal, not a weapons discharge, not a sensor alarm, a transmission, open frequency, multiple languages. And one of those languages buried in the carrier wave like a signature was Kethar. "This message is for the Kavar Dominion," the transmission said in perfect unaccented Hith, the formal military tongue. "You have been observed. Your methods are known. Your targets have been documented. You destroyed 22 civilizations. We have preserved the data of all 22, their histories, their art, their science, their names." Kakdul was already upright in his throne. "You came to our system. You have returned to our system. You have watched us. We have watched you longer." A pause. "You will leave the Cygnus campaign immediately. You will release the 4 surviving species currently held as vassal states in your proximal sectors. You will never again approach within 100 light years of Sol. These are not requests." Another pause, shorter. "This is what happens to those who ignore us." The transmission ended and then the sensors lit up. Not around the Dominion throne. Not in the Sol system. In the Cygnus campaign theater, 600 light years away in the middle of the Kathavar advance fleet, 18,000 ships, not 4,000, not 12,000, 18,000. And they had been there for his intelligence officer was screaming numbers more than 3 weeks, sitting in deep space, perfectly cloaked, waiting, not attacking, just sitting there for 3 weeks, patient, silent, invisible. They had let the Kavar advance fleet pass through them, let them set up camp, let them begin their survey operations, and then they had simply appeared. Every Cathar weapon system was already locked and tracked. Every ship had a minimum of 3 targeting solutions. The humans, because now, impossibly, absurdly, it could only be the humans, had not fired a single shot. They were just visible, waiting to see what the Kavar would do. Kakdul stared at the display for 31 seconds. His battle commanders waited for the order. They were ready. 12K of our war fleets positioned across known space, 140,000 ships in total, if he called them all to this location. "Stand down," he said. The bridge went absolutely silent. "All units, stand down. Weapons!" His voice was controlled, completely steady. "Signal the human fleet in their language, all of them, that we acknowledge the message. Request a meeting." Valens stared at him. "Supreme Warlord, 4 years ago, they annihilated 4,000 of my ships in 11 minutes. Kakdul said, his tone academic now. The tone of a strategist doing math rather than a warrior seeking glory. "Today, they show up with 18,000 ships in the middle of my advanced fleet, and they haven't fired." He looked at the display. "They could have destroyed the entire advance fleet before a single distress call reached us. They chose not to. That tells me 2 things. He held up one finger. "They are not here to destroy us today. A second finger. They want to talk." He looked at Valoon. "When an entity that can destroy you whenever it wants chooses instead to speak, you listen." The response from the human fleet came 40 minutes later. It was a set of coordinates, deep space, neutral territory, and a single line in high Cath that made Caxadul read it, twice. "Come alone. We will do the same," he wondered, not for the first time and with growing unease, exactly how many ships humanity actually had. Fleet Admiral James Kowalski, older now gray at the temples, with the bone-deep exhaustion of a man who had spent 6 years preparing for a conversation he never entirely wanted to have, stood in the forward observation deck of the Reckoning and watched the Kavar Supreme Warlord's shuttle approach. "He came himself," Commander Chen said, standing beside him. "Of course he did," Kowalski said. "He's the most accomplished military mind his species has produced. He did the math." He paused. "He's here because he's smart enough to know that we could have destroyed him several times over and didn't, and smart enough to understand that there's a reason for that." "What do we tell him?" Chen asked. Kowalski was quiet for a moment. He looked out at the stars, at the ancient, indifferent, dark, full of civilizations that had lived and died and been conquered and erased, and thought of his grandmother standing in a bunker under a mountain, looking at images of alien ships and deciding that humanity would survive. The truth, he said. Kakdul had stood in the presence of dying species. He had received the surrender of civilizations. He had walked through the wreckage of worlds. He had never sat across a table from a human being. The creature, tall for its species, gay-haired with steady dark eyes and a deliberate stillness that Caxul recognized as a warrior's discipline, poured 2 cups of a liquid from an insulated vessel and placed one on the Kethavar side of the table without being asked. "It's coffee," the human said. "It's bitter and might taste terrible to you, but it's the most important substance my species has ever created, so I feel it would be rude not to offer it." Kadul looked at the cup, looked at the human, picked it up and drank. It tasted like heated volcanic ash. He set the cup down. "Admiral James." "Kowalski," the human said. "I represent the Terran Armada. You know why we're here." "I know what you want," Caxel replied in high, letting the translation software handle the relay. "You want us to stop expanding, stop conquering. You have displayed enough force to make that demand credible." His crest feathers rose slightly, not aggression, but assessment. "What I want to know is what you are, humans," Kowalski said. "From Earth, the Tier 4 world your species almost destroyed. Your technology contradicts every observable fact about your civilization." "Our observable civilization?" "Yes." Kowalski folded his hands. "Let me explain something to you about humans, Supreme Warlord. We are a deeply divided species. We fight about everything. Our politics, our religions, our resources, our borders. We are fractious and loud, and we cannot agree on almost anything." He paused. "But we have one universal constant. every culture, every nation, every language, every human being who has ever lived. He leaned forward. We protect our children. He let that sit. When your survey ships first appeared at our helipause 63 years ago, my grandmother, Admiral Elena Vasquez, identified what you were. She spent the last 40 years of her life building the answer. Not a military alliance, not a planetary defense grid, something you would never look for because it exploits the single greatest advantage human beings have over every other species we've encountered. Caxtool waited. We are patient when it matters, Kowalski said. Not always, not even usually. But when someone threatens our children, we can wait forever. We can plan for decades. We can sacrifice comfort and recognition and glory, and the knowledge that anyone will ever know what we did. And we can do it willingly without complaint for as long as it takes. He straightened 47 years. 17 nations that never agreed on anything else agreed on one thing. Our children would not die to your empire. 63 years of surveillance, reverse engineering your technology from sensor. Data, developing cloaking systems your sensors cannot detect, building ships that leave zero emission signatures. We had 6,000 ships when your first invasion fleet arrived. We currently have. He stopped. Well, you'll never know exactly how many we have. That's the point. Caxtool stared at him. You have been building this fleet in secret for over 60 years. We have been building this fleet in secret since before anyone alive today was born. Kowalski said, the scientists and engineers who designed those first ships are dead. The admirals who planned the first tactics are dead. What they built didn't die with them. It was passed down, improved, expanded, refined. His voice was even, factual, without boastfulness. We are not a warlike species by default, Supreme Warlord, but we are an extraordinarily good one when we decide war is necessary. Caxel was silent for a long moment. 22 species, he said finally. You mentioned 22 species. Every one of them, Kowalski said. Their languages, their histories, their art, their science, their names, their faces, the things they loved and feared. We preserved all of it. It exists. It is real. Those civilizations are not entirely gone, not as long as we hold their records. He looked directly at Caxtool. That is also who we are. We collect the lost things. We remember the erased. A very long silence. What do you want from us? The Supreme Warlord asked. And for the first time in his 4,000-year lineage's history, the question was genuine. He did not want conquest. He wanted to understand. 3 things. Kowalski said, stop the expansion, release your vassal species, and tell your dominion, all of it, every fleet, every outpost, every commander, that there is a species called humanity on a blue planet in the Orion Arm, and we are watching all of it all the time. You want them afraid of you? I want them to think twice, Kowalski corrected. I don't want wars. Wars are expensive and people die. I want the cost-benefit calculation to change. He picked up his coffee. Every civilization your dominion approaches from now on has a silent ally that doesn't exist on any chart, doesn't have visible territory or infrastructure, and will appear out of nowhere at exactly the wrong moment if your people make the wrong choice. He drank. We are everywhere, he said quietly. We are nowhere. We are the thing you didn't see coming, even when you were looking directly at us. He set the cup down. And we are extraordinarily tired of watching civilizations die. CX Dual looked at this human, this one, creature from a fractured, chaotic, coffee-drinking species on a single planet, and understood something he had never understood in his long, victorious life. He had conquered 22 civilizations. Each one had been assessed, categorized, and destroyed according to their measurable capabilities. He had never once asked the only question that mattered. What are they capable of that we cannot measure? The Cathaver Dominion did not collapse. It didn't need to. Caxel returned from his meeting with Kowalski changed in a way that was subtle and permanent. The way a blade changes when it has been held against a sharpening stone. Still the same blade, still dangerous, but different in some quality that was hard to name. He issued 3 orders on his return. The Cygnus campaign was suspended. The 4 vassal species in the proximal sectors received their independence charters within 30 days. The first voluntary release of territory in Kavar history, and a message was transmitted on all Dominion military frequencies to every fleet and outpost, and forward operating position in the known galaxy. The message was brief. It listed the coordinates of the Sol system. It described in precise military language what had happened to the 4th expansion group. It described the meeting, and it ended with 4 words that had never appeared in any Kethar military communication before. Threat assessment, do not engage. 3 months after the meeting, a Keith Avar probe arrived at the helipause of the Sol system. Not the aggressive sensor sweep of the 2nd Fleet, but a small single, probe broadcasting a low-power identification signal in multiple languages. Not a weapon, not a spy, a message. This is a memorial marker, the broadcast said in 63 languages, including English, placed by order of Supreme Warlord Kakdul of the Kathavar Dominion, in recognition of 22 civilizations lost to Dominion expansion, whose histories are preserved by the people of the system. Their names are recorded here. 22 species, their names, exactly as Kowalski had said they would be remembered. The probe stayed at the helipause for 3 years before its power faded. No one from Earth officially acknowledged it. In a conference room in a mountain that didn't appear on maps 40 years after Elena Vasquez had sat in that same chair, her granddaughter, Dr. Maria Vasquez, director of the Exodus Dark program, 3rd generation, looked at the latest intelligence summary and allowed herself to feel something she had never felt in this room before. Relief. Around the table sat representatives of 41 nations. Now the program had grown. The secret had spread, only as far as necessary, and somehow it had held. The fleet stood at 23,000 ships. 12 new cloaking refinements had been deployed. 3 new drive systems were in testing. The Kathavar had not advanced on a new system in 4 months. 4 months was not forever. It wasn't even a guarantee. The Dominion was a vast, ancient, violent civilization with institutional momentum that would not bend easily. There would be other commanders, other temptations, other expansion pushes. But 4 months of quiet for 23 civilizations that would otherwise be ash and silence was 4 months of children growing up, of art being made, of names being passed down, and histories being continued. Update from Fleet Admiral Kowalski, his aide said, sliding a tablet across the table. Maria Vasquez read it, set it down, looked at the faces around the table. Engineers, admirals, scientists, intelligence officers, the heirs of a 60-year secret held by dead men and women who had chosen a difficult, invisible kind of heroism. He says, she told them that the work continues. She paused. I think my grandmother would have found that sufficient. Far out in deep space, deep in the dark between stars in locations that appeared on no chart, 23,000 human warships waited. They ran on cold fusion plants that emitted nothing detectable. Their hulls drank every radar and sensor wave that touched them. Their crews lived in recycled air and artificial light and the specific companionable silence of people doing an important job that no one would ever see. They played card games. They read. They argued about the best football teams of the past century. They celebrated birthdays and promotions and got into petty feuds over who had taken the last of the good coffee. They wrote letters home that would travel through quantum-encrypted relays to reach families who believed their loved ones were stationed at classified but conventional research facilities. They were in every ordinary sense normal human beings who happened to maintain the most capable, undetectable fleet in the known galaxy. When the Kavar probes swept the solar system, one of dozens of sweeps over the following decades, they found the same thing every time. A quiet planet, one moon, a civilization that had reached for the stars and found only its own asteroid belt. A species arguing about politics and making music and doing the 10,000 undignified, passionate, chaotic things that humans did when they thought no one dangerous was watching. The fleet was never there when they looked. It was never not there. 50 years later, a young girl in rural Montana looked up at the night sky and asked her grandfather what was out there. He was an old man, white-haired, with the kind of stillness that came from having spent 30 years in recycled air in the dark between stars, retired now, living quietly, keeping a secret that would never fully be his to tell. He looked at the sky for a long time. "Everything," he said finally. "Friends we haven't met. Dangers we've already handled. History that nobody knows about yet." He paused. "And guardians." "What kind of guardians?" she asked. He smiled. The stars burned cold and brilliant above them. "The invisible kind," he said. "The best kind." He squeezed her hand. "The kind you don't see until the moment someone needs the most." And then he looked at the sky one more time, at the vast, ancient, indifferent dark, full of things living and dying and being remembered and being forgotten. And then they're everywhere. She looked at the stars for a long time. "Are they watching us right now?" she asked. Her grandfather didn't answer for a moment. "Honey," he said gently, "they never stopped."